Hello, this video is going to focus on multiplying decimals. In this first problem, it asks us to find 2/10 times 8/10. I'm going to use the visual model to help me find my product. Now the first thing I'm going to do is draw 2/10, 1/10 and 2/10. Now I'm going to switch the color and I'm going to draw 8/10 in this model. 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10, 7/10, and 8/10. Now I'm going to switch the color so I can figure out where overlap is. In this area that I'm highlighting in red is where the yellow and the green met. This is the answer to my problem. Now if I was to count these boxes, I have 16 boxes, but notice it's 16 out of the 100 total boxes I have. So really when I'm counting, I have 100th, 200th, 300th, 400th, 500th, 600ths, 700ths, 800ths, 900ths, 1000ths, 1100ths, 1200ths, 1300ths, 1400ths, 1500ths, and 1600ths. So to represent my answer to this problem, it would simply be 1600ths. Now, for my next problem here, I have 4/10 times 2/10. I'm going to do the same thing. First, I'm going to shade in 4/10. 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, and 4/10. Now in yellow, in the opposite direction, I'm going to shade in 2/10. 1/10 and 2/10. In red, I'm going to highlight wherever there's overlap, and that's going to represent my answer. So notice here I have 8 boxes, which represents 800ths as my answer. Now I'm choosing to write this in decimal notation because my problem is in decimal form, but you can also write this as 800ths in fraction form as well. So here's my answer to the problem. Notice for these two problems, I use the visual model to help me find my product. For this next problem, we're also given another visual model. Here, we have 2 times 6/10. Now notice I have 2 whole rectangles here because I have 2 holes in my problem. And we're multiplying that by 6/10. So I'm going to shade in my first hole 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10. In my next hole, I'm going to shade in another 6/10. 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10. Now to find my answer, I'm going to count all the pieces that are shaded to help me find out my answer. So I have 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10, 7/10, 8/10, 9/10, 10/10, 10/10. That's 10 divided by 10, which is 1. But now I also have 1/10, 2/10, or you could say 11/10, 12/10. So we have 1 and 2/10 as my answer. So notice here, I counted all my pieces that I have shaded to help me find my solution to this problem. For the next one, I have 2 times 2/10. Again, I have 2 holes, but this time I'm going to only shade in 2/10 in each box. So here I have 1/10 and 2/10. So to find my answer, I can combine all the shaded region. I have 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10. So my answer to this problem is simply just 4/10. Notice again, I was given a visual model and I was able to use that visual model to help me find the solution to my problem. For this next one, there's no visual model given, but in fact, they kind of gave you an answer. Now you have to find the solution. Some of you might have started to notice a pattern on where I'm putting my decimal when you were using the visual models. In these problems, it's important that maybe you're potentially developing that pattern and recognizing what that is, or you can also feel free to draw these problems out on a piece of paper and draw your own visual model to help you solve them. Here we have 8 times 8 equals 64. So in this problem here, 8 times 8 is 64. Then 8/10 times 8/10 is going to be something. Now we do know that 8 times 8 is 64. And if you were to draw 8/10 in one direction, 8/10 in the other, you would get 64 hundredths. But let's prove how that 64 could help us here. So what you can do when you're multiplying decimals is first eliminate the decimals in the problem. So if I multiply this by 10, I'm moving my decimal point over one place to the right. If I multiply this number by 10 as well, I'm moving the decimal point over one place to the right here. So now by eliminating the decimals, I'm back with 8 times 8, which that was given to us already, which is 64. The problem is 64 is not my answer for a few reasons. When we multiply a small number by a small number, you're also going to get a really small number for your answer. 64 is a very large answer. You also have decimals within your question, which means your answer is also most likely going to have decimals as well. In fact, it will have decimals. So now, we see here that we multiplied by 10 and we multiplied by 10 again. So really we multiplied by 100. That's moving my decimal point over two places to the right. So now if I multiply by 100 in my question, I need to now do the opposite operation in my answer. So now instead of multiplying by 100, I'm going to divide by 100. 1, 2. And by dividing by 100, that's going to have me move my decimal point two places to the left. That is the same as dividing by 100, giving me an answer of 64 hundredths. Now for this next problem, it's the same steps. Notice here we have 3 times 6 is 18. So 3/10 times 6/10 is something. Now you are welcome to draw out a visual model to help you solve this, or you can follow along and use this strategy. If I multiply by 10 here, I'm moving that decimal point over one place to the right. If I multiply by 10 again, I move my decimal point over to the right again another time. So now this is giving me 3 times 6. And you know how to multiply 3 times 6. That's simply 18. But just like the previous problem, 18 is not my final answer. You need your decimal point. So I multiplied by 100 here. I moved my decimal point over two places to the right, which is multiplying by 100. That's eliminating my decimal point, so now I can multiply. But if I multiplied by 100, I need to now look at my answer and I'm dividing by 100, moving it over two places to the left. Now, this gives me an answer of 18 hundredths. Now for this next one, we have 6 times 8 is 48, but now we have 6/10 times 8 hundredths. So in this case, we're going to multiply by 10 here, and I'm going to write that 1, reminding me I moved my decimal point over one place to the right. I'm going to move my decimal point over now here, two places to the right. That's telling me I multiplied by 100. So together, I moved my decimal point over to the right 3 places, which is telling me I multiplied by 1,000 to eliminate my decimal point, because now I could simply just do 6 times 8, which they gave us 6 times 8 is 48, but that's not my final answer. Every whole number has a decimal point at the end of it. Now, we multiplied by 1,000, moving that decimal point over 3 places to the right in my question. Now in my answer, I'm going to divide by 1,000, moving that decimal point over 1, 2, 3 places to the left. Now, in this empty spot here, you are going to represent a 0 in your tenths place, giving you an answer of 48 thousandths. Now it's very important that you rewrite these problems on scrap paper, whether you choose to draw a visual model or you would like to multiply this way. Regardless, it's very easy to miss a spot when you're multiplying, making a very simple mistake if you do not write out this work. Now notice in each of these questions, I multiplied by 10 or 100 or 1,000 in my question. When I multiplied by a power of 10, I'm moving that decimal point over to the right. Then in my answer, I'm doing the opposite operation. I'm going to now divide by 10, 100, or 1,000, whatever power of 10 you have. And by dividing, you're moving that decimal point to the left. And that's going to help you determine where your decimal point is going to go in your final answer. Now for these problems here, they actually gave you the answer, but the answer has no decimal point in it. So they're telling you that 2 times 5 and 26 hundredths is going to give you an answer of 1052. However, that's not your answer because you're missing the decimal point. So what they already did is they multiplied by 10, now 100, moving that decimal point over 2 places to the right. So they did 2 times 526 for you. That gave you 1052, but that's not your final answer. Now you need to go into your final answer and look at the end and look at where your decimal point is going to be. Every whole number has a decimal point at the end of the number. If I multiplied by 100 in my question, I'm now going to divide by 100 in my answer, moving that decimal point over 2 places to the left, giving me 10 and 52 hundredths. Now I'm going to do the same thing for this problem. Notice they already found an answer, but that answer has no decimal point in it. I'm going to look at my problem and I'm first going to eliminate my decimal points. I'm multiplying by 10, then 100. That's telling me I moved it 2 places to the right here. And in 5 and 4 tenths, I multiplied by 10, moving my decimal point 1 place to the right. So 2 plus 1 is 3, telling me in my question I multiplied by 1,000, giving me telling me that I moved my decimal point to the right 3 places. Now you can do 977 times 54, which you all know how to do that. You may need to rewrite this on scrap paper, but for the purpose of this problem, they gave you the answer. But notice the answer to this problem is this, but you want the answer to this problem with the decimals. So now, since I multiplied by 1,000 in my question, in my answer, I'm now going to divide, moving that decimal point 1, 2, 3 places to the left. So now I have 52 and 758 as my answer. Now for this next problem here, okay, I already rewrote this problem vertically. You have 5 and 6 tenths times 6 and 2 tenths. The first thing you want to do is eliminate your decimal points so you can multiply. I'm going to multiply by 10 here, moving it 1 place to the right, and I'm multiplying by 10 here again, moving it 1 place to the right here. So that means I'm moving my decimal point here 2 times to the right in this question. That's telling me I multiplied by 100, giving me 56 times 62. Now I could simply multiply, and I know how to do this. 2 times 6 is 12, 2 times 5 is 10, plus 1 is 11. Now notice these are the same steps for multiplying I've always done. 6 times 6 is 36, 6 times 5 is 30, plus 3 is 33. Now I add everything together, and I get my product, which is 3,472. However, that's what 56 times 62 is. You need to find what 5 and 6 tenths times 6 and 2 tenths is. So now I multiplied by 100 in my question, moving my decimal point over 2 places to the right. So now I need to divide by 100 in my answer, moving my decimal point 1, 2 places to the left, giving me a product of 34 and 72 hundredths. Now this is the answer to my original question. Notice for all of these problems, I am eliminating my decimal point so then I can multiply. Once you eliminate your decimal point, you can simply multiply. However, it's very important that you put your decimal point back in your answer when you are finished multiplying to help you find the final solution to the problem. Now, you are welcome to refer back to this video at any time on my YouTube channel to help you with multiplying decimals.